For more than 40 years, Gen X Black women have been expected to survive what other people were allowed to complain about: workplace bias, family pressure, financial stress, and the exhausting demand to always be the strong one. They learned to read a room before speaking, handle problems without asking for help, and hide their pain so well that people started believing they didn't have any. But that strength came with a psychological cost, and the final survival pattern may explain why so many are now choosing boundaries, silence, and peace over approval. Gen X Black women, where in America are you watching from? It is late afternoon in 1981, and a 9-year-old black girl is standing on the front porch with a metal key hanging from a string around her neck. She lets herself into a quiet house. No parent is waiting in the kitchen. No text message asks whether she made it home safely. There is no doorbell camera, no location sharing, no digital trail proving that she is all right. She locks the door behind her because she has already been taught to check it twice. Then she turns on the radio. Maybe an old R&B song fills the room while she makes a snack, starts her homework, and listens for her younger brother. She knows which cabinet holds the medicine. She knows not to answer the phone unless the caller identifies themselves. She knows how to warm dinner and how to look calm when the house makes a strange sound. She is only 9, but the world has already begun speaking to her as if childhood were a luxury she could not afford. That girl grew up. She became the woman people describe as reliable, private, capable, intimidating, difficult to impress, and almost impossible to surprise. She became the person everyone calls when something goes wrong. She knows how to make a plan with too little money, too little time, and too little help. And because she does it so well, few people ask what it cost her to become that woman. American culture spends endless time analyzing baby boomers, millennials, and Gen Z. Their anxieties are named, their habits are studied, their rebellions become headlines. But Gen X is often treated like the silent hallway between louder rooms. Within that overlooked generation, Black women have carried a particularly complicated burden. They were expected to be strong before anyone asked whether they felt safe. They were praised for independence before anyone considered whether independence had been chosen. They were trusted with responsibility while their vulnerability remained invisible. So when a Gen X Black woman keeps her distance, solves problems alone, or struggles to ask for help, others may call her cold. But coldness may not be the truth. What looks like emotional distance may be a nervous system that learned very early not to expect rescue. What looks like stubbornness may be memory. What looks like control may be the survival strategy of a child who discovered that mistakes had immediate consequences and comfort was not always available afterward. Psychologists use the term adultification bias to describe what happens when children are seen as older, less innocent, and more responsible than they really are. Georgetown researchers found that adults often perceived Black girls, especially between the ages of 5 and 14, as needing less protection, nurturing, and comfort than white girls of the same age. Think about what that means in the life of one child. When she is frightened, adults may call her dramatic. When she is quiet, they may assume she can handle it. When she makes a mistake, she may receive punishment instead of patience. When she shows confidence, she may be labeled disrespectful. And when she carries an adult burden successfully, the adults around her may not recognize that a burden was placed on her at all. They may simply call her mature. Maturity sounds like praise, but sometimes it is grief wearing a compliment. For many Gen X Black women, childhood was shortened not only by practical responsibility, but by the expectation that they should understand more, tolerate more, and need less. They often lived in environments where a forgotten key, a missed bus, an unpaid bill, or one careless decision created consequences that had to be solved immediately. There was not always time to sit with a feeling. The question was not, "How did that make you feel?" The question was, "What are you going to do about it?" So the brain adapted. It learned to scan the room before relaxing. It learned to read tone, posture, and silence. It learned to think 3 steps ahead, because being caught unprepared felt dangerous. It learned that tears might be real, but the problem would still be waiting when the crying ended. This is where the armor begins, not in adulthood, not in the workplace, not after a painful marriage or betrayal. The armor begins when a girl realizes that her feelings will not stop the world from demanding an answer, so she becomes the answer. She handles it, she figures it out, she keeps moving. Over time, this pattern becomes so natural that even she may stop noticing how much energy it requires. By middle age, people admire her calm during a crisis. They do not see the calculations behind it. They praise her strength. They do not ask whether she ever gets to put that strength down. This also helps explain something often misunderstood about Gen X Black women, their privacy. They came of age before every meal, heartbreak, opinion, and family argument became public content. Privacy was not emptiness. It was protection. You did not tell everyone your business because information could be used against you. You did not reveal every weakness because not everyone had earned the right to witness it. For younger generations, visibility can feel like connection. For many Gen X Black women, visibility can feel like exposure. That does not mean they are antisocial. It means they distinguish sharply between being known and being observed. They may share deeply with a small circle and reveal almost nothing to everyone else. Their inner world is not absent, it is guarded. Psychologists sometimes call another part of this pattern defensive pessimism. It is the habit of imagining what could go wrong, not simply because someone is negative, but because preparing for the worst creates a sense of control. She checks the reservation twice. She keeps extra cash where nobody knows. She saves important documents. She notices the exit. She does not fully trust a promise until she sees evidence. To someone who has always felt protected, this may look cynical. But to someone who has watched jobs disappear, marriages collapse, institutions fail, and opportunities arrive with hidden conditions, expecting stability can feel more dangerous than expecting disruption. She is not trying to ruin the moment. She is trying to make sure the moment cannot ruin her. That is the psychology beneath so much of what the world misreads. Her caution is not a lack of hope. Her independence is not proof that she has no needs. Her silence is not evidence that she has nothing to say. Often, it means she learned that survival depended on understanding more than she revealed. And that lesson followed her into offices, relationships, motherhood, friendship, and every room where people benefited from her competence while overlooking the woman carrying it. That competence followed her into the workplace, where it often became both her greatest protection and her heaviest burden. Many Gen X Black women started working early. They babysat, cleaned houses, worked retail, answered phones, prepared food, or helped relatives long before anyone used phrases like professional development or transferable skills. They learned to count change without depending on a machine. They remembered schedules because nobody was going to remind them. They learned that arriving late could cost money the family could not afford to lose. Work was never only about ambition. Work was survival, dignity, and proof that no one could easily take away their ability to stand on their own. That is why many of these women do not place blind faith in employers. They watched parents and relatives give decades to companies that later downsized, relocated, or replaced them. They survived recessions, shrinking benefits, disappearing pensions, and the financial shock of 2008. They learned that a company could praise loyalty on Monday and eliminate a position on Friday, so their deepest loyalty was rarely to an organization. It was loyalty to competence. Learn the system. Understand the numbers. Keep your resume updated. Know how to do more than one job. Never let one person become the gatekeeper to your survival. This is also why they often respect real skill more than impressive titles. A manager who cannot solve a basic problem does not automatically earn their admiration. A leader who speaks confidently but avoids responsibility may quickly lose their trust. They have little patience for authority without ability because their own lives never allowed them to hide behind a title. When something broke, they had to fix it. When someone failed to show up, they had to compensate. When a family crisis happened, they did not receive a promotion for managing it. They simply handled it and returned to work. But there is a hidden cost to building an identity around capability. When you have been the dependable one for decades, asking for help can feel unnatural. Sometimes, it can even feel dangerous. Hyper-independence is often mistaken for confidence. From the outside, it appears powerful. A woman pays her own bills, solves her own problems, makes her own decisions, and refuses to become a burden. But underneath that strength may live an older belief: if I need someone, they may disappoint me. If I depend on someone, they may gain power over me. If I admit that I am overwhelmed, people may no longer respect me. So she continues carrying more than anyone realizes. She may comfort everyone else while hiding her own exhaustion. She may give advice she never allows herself to receive. She may offer money, time, rides, childcare, emotional support, and practical solutions, then say, "I'm fine," when someone asks what she needs. This is where the strong Black woman ideal becomes complicated. Strength can be a source of pride, cultural survival, and intergenerational wisdom. But when strength becomes the only acceptable identity, it leaves no safe place for fear, grief, confusion, or rest. A woman may begin to believe that asking for assistance means she has failed at being herself. She does not merely do strong things, she feels required to be strong at all times. And that requirement can become a private prison, because the people around her may love her strength more than they understand her humanity. They may celebrate the way she survives without noticing how often she is forced to survive alone. Then motherhood adds another layer. Many Gen X Black women entered parenthood determined to give their children something different. They wanted to be more emotionally available. They wanted to ask questions, attend events, listen carefully, and provide reassurance they may not have received themselves. They did not want their children coming home to an empty house, silently managing fears too large for their age. They wanted their children to know that an adult was paying attention. But healing one's own childhood through parenting creates a painful paradox. She may give her children softness, then worry that she has made them too soft. She may protect them, then fear they are becoming dependent. She may solve problems for them, then suddenly wonder whether they are learning how to survive without her. Part of her wants to spare them from hardship. Another part remembers that hardship taught her everything. She knows how to function in uncertainty because uncertainty trained her. She knows how to improvise because there was no instruction manual. She knows how to repair, negotiate, stretch, substitute, and make something work because failure was rarely allowed to be the final answer. She learned with her hands. She watched someone fix a sink, change a tire, mend clothing, balance a checkbook, revive an old appliance, or prepare a meal from whatever remained in the kitchen. Knowledge became deeply encoded because it was connected to real consequences. She did not simply search for an answer. She became the answer. Now she watches a younger generation reach for a phone whenever something breaks. She sees children surrounded by information, but sometimes disconnected from direct experience, and she worries that convenience may weaken the instincts that once kept her alive. Yet she also knows, somewhere beneath that worry, that her children should not have to suffer in order to become capable. That is one of the hardest truths for a survivor to accept. Pain can teach, but pain is not the only teacher. Neglect can create independence, but independence can also be taught through trust, patience, and responsibility. A child does not need to feel abandoned to become strong, and a mother does not have to recreate the conditions that wounded her just to prepare her children for the world. This is why Gen X Black women are more than survivors of a forgotten generation. They are bridges. They stand between analog childhood and digital adulthood, between the silence of their mothers and the emotional vocabulary of their daughters, between communities that demanded endurance and younger generations that are learning to name trauma openly. But bridges are rarely praised for what they carry. People walk across them, depend on them, place enormous weight upon them, and because the bridge continues standing, nobody asks whether the structure is tired. That is how many Gen X Black women have lived. They have held families together, trained coworkers, cared for aging parents, guided children, supported partners, protected siblings, and quietly absorbed responsibilities that should have been shared. Then they were called strong, as though the word itself were enough repayment. But strength should not require permanent exhaustion. Your ability to survive without help does not mean you were meant to live without support. Your privacy deserves respect, but it does not have to become isolation. Your caution protected you, but it does not have to make every peaceful moment feel suspicious. Your competence is real, but you do not have to prove it by carrying everything alone. The little girl with the key around her neck did what she had to do. She became observant, resourceful, prepared. She learned how to protect herself in a world that often expected too much from her and offered too little tenderness in return. You do not need to shame that girl for becoming guarded. You need to thank her, and then you need to let her rest. Because resilience is part of your legacy, but peace may be the gift you finally give yourself. You are allowed to receive care without earning it through suffering. You are allowed to ask for help before you reach the breaking point. You are allowed to become softer without becoming weaker. You have already proven that you can survive. The next chapter is about discovering how it feels to live without treating every day like an emergency. If this message reflects your story, leave a comment and share the experience that shaped your strength. Subscribe to the channel and send this video to another Gen X Black woman who has spent too many years carrying everything in silence. Let us build a community where strength is honored, rest is protected, and no woman has to disappear behind her own resilience again.